Today, we're going to reveal who the hell am I and why I should be coaching on this subject. We're basically going to be establishing my credibility. But don't worry, I brought my receipts. And welcome back to another episode of Ryan Ransom Reveals. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ransom. Now, I don't like necessarily talking about myself. I do love talking, but not about myself. I have so many other things that I'm passionate about and I would rather discuss. However, if I'm going to be here telling you guys what to do, I better be here explain to those who might not know me some of my background. So, first, I think we should start in the beginning. And we'll basically run through this in chronological order. So let's start with the introduction into my journey into hospitality. So I started my career actually in hotels. Hospitality was not the plan. This was just some starter job that I did in college. I did concierge work, I worked the front desk, and I was actually moved up to front desk management. It was clear that I was good at this job, but again, this wasn't necessarily my passion. This all started for me in the busy tourist town of San Diego. And really, what better place to take my first steps into hospitality? I quickly learned the ropes, and I was getting all sorts of free dinners at all the top restaurants all over town. How, you may ask? Well, I established relationships with many of the local restaurants, creating referral programs with them, and exchanging comp dinners for sending them endless amount of guests who I was dealing with at the front desk. It was amazing. Not only did I have credit these restaurants, but I had clout. Anytime I would take a girl on a date, we'd go to any of my partner restaurants, and they would treat me like absolute royalty. It made me look so impressive to my dates that this young kid, barely 20 years old, could have such pull. But beyond the personal benefits that I was receiving, I was learning some really invaluable lessons about the business without even really realizing it. One was how to create strong relationships and cross promotions with successful non-competing businesses. Because I wasn't just sending these guests to any rat hole. I was sending them to great restaurants. And this wasn't just some sell. I ate at these places. I knew their menu and their ambiance. So I could ask the guest about the experience that they were looking for. And then I could read them and I could make the best recommendation, which would be a great fit for them and bring them the highest level of happiness. Of course, nailed it. And so then they would come back the next night, looking for another recommendation. And additionally, I had worked out offers with all my partner restaurants. So in addition to fitting them with their best fit that would enhance their vacation experience, I would get them a discount or like a free dessert or a glass of wine or something. And so this was a win-win-win. Everybody involved received a benefit. The restaurants were packed with high demand and great reviews from happy guests. The guests got a great experience with a touch of gratitude and something free or discounted. And of course, as a broke college kid, I got some free food and some positive dating experiences, right? And now to say where this is where it all started isn't exactly true. I did my first year of college at Arizona State. And while I was there to play football and learn communications at the time, what I also did was I threw some of the most epic dorm parties that the school has ever seen. And if you know anything about ASU, you know it's already a party school. That year, we were ranked number 1 by Playboy. So to make a mark for throwing parties wasn't easy. So there I was, taking my very first little baby steps into the future that I had no idea that was coming for me. And looking back now, it seems so fitting. I mean, what a perfect beginning to my story arc. But let's get serious and let's talk now about my first major real success that happened in Sunset Beach. So for my start in hotels in San Diego, I did what any party and money and girl motivated guy is going to do, right? I became a bartender. And like I said, I've always kind of been cool. So after learning the ropes and paying my dues in San Diego and then into Orange County, I moved back up to the LA area. And I was bartending Thursday through Saturday and making enough money to play all week long. I wasn't motivated much beyond just enjoying my life. I was just fine being happy and having fun. I was surfing and snowboarding and dating and bartending, and this really wasn't the worst life for a 24-year-old kid. But unbeknownst to me, this was all about to end. I just started this brand new bartending job in Sunset Beach, right on the sand. And it was called Harpoon Harry's. It used to be this very iconic and popular place. It was busy, but now it was kind of a shadow of its former self. And this bar job also came with management duties. So not only was I responsible for the bars on the evenings I was working, but also the entire wait staff and then the kitchen operations on the service side of the line. Then, just a couple months into that gig, the guy who was the 5-day-a-week bartender and he was also the acting general manager, he got transferred to our sister restaurant, leaving this opening. Leaving a spot open now for a new 5-day-a-week bartending general manager. And I'm not going to fill your head with false ideas that I really wanted this role. Just nobody else in the organization did. So somehow now, at 25 years old, I fell into this position. So where I lacked the real world business experience, I understood how to be cool. And so I started revolutionizing my very first restaurant, Sunset Beach, all by building this positive workplace culture. Part of the reason this place struggled was the lack of culture and vision. And without throwing anybody under the bus, my owner was challenging. And he had come from a pizza and 24-hour diner operations. Steak and seafood restaurant with elevated service wasn't really his wheelhouse. And since he had bought it, he ran it more like a diner than the quality establishment it was. And this includes the culture. He was absentee, and things were just kind of on autopilot, and that's the way he liked it. So now that I was at the helm, I started increasing the vibe and the service standards and the operation and the respect the staff was treated with. I focused on creating a supportive and enjoyable work environment. The result? A happy staff that brought in soaring sales and increased guest satisfaction. Of course. And I'm proud to say, without any experience, I increased the number of covers, the sales, guest satisfaction, and employee morale. And now I was ready for a bigger challenge. So now I was doing all this by learning by doing. And then applying my previous experience from my bad bosses of what not to do. I saw in previous jobs how the owner being dismissive or disrespectful to the staff led to cooks stealing food, waiters comping dinners for their friends, and the bar staff exchanging drinks for higher tips. No one cared about the profit line, and why should they? They cared about their own pocket. And again, why would anybody work harder for someone who wasn't respectful or even appreciative? I didn't need to go to Harvard or Wharton to figure this out. Simple, man. Garbage in, garbage out. My heart instinctively knew that if you do what's right because it's right, if you treat people well and with respect, the joy that they feel will not only be shown in their own glow, but it'll be paid forward to the guests. And the more the guests feel this, it's not only going to bring them back more, but they're going to start to bring their friends. So, my next stop, transforming my first nightclub in Long Beach. So, This nightclub had just opened in Long Beach, and this is where this previous hotel banquet room was. And I do have to hand it to the owners for starting this and their vision and their ingenuity. This was absolutely brilliant, and they did a really great job. And there was very little here for them to start with, and I had them become a regular. And I would bring large groups of my friends there to party with me, and I really loved this place, and I saw massive potential. However, it was starting off very slowly. And I befriended the owner, and I continued to just beg him to give me a shot at this place. But I had no experience, not in nightclubs. And being this managing bartender at a restaurant with only four server sections wasn't really the pedigree that he was looking for. But as fate would have it, two things aligned, which would write what would be the catapulting success of both the club and my career and my status within the industry. So one, where things were not progressing the way the owners had hoped, and the club was slow, and the sales were low, and they were making it, but this was not the hot spot of success that they had really anticipated. The second thing was they were short a bartender on Halloween night. And I got a call from them that afternoon, the day of, asking if I could help them out that night. And I knew once I got my foot in the door, I could show my talent. So I did what I needed to do, and I said yes. Now, they had two main bars inside, and then they had this rinky-dink patio bar outside with like almost no infrastructure. You were literally on an island by yourself. You were pouring mixers from a can. Nobody wanted to work it. It was viewed as the worst bar location in the club, reserved for the weakest bartender. Now, before me, the patio bar was included in the tip pool. However, the night I started and showed up, as this new guy, the bar staff jumped on this opportunity, demanding that I work the patio bar and I wouldn't be included in the tip pool. So now my little desert island just got even more remote. And while they had teams of barbacks restocking for them, I had to stock this whole thing myself the whole night. And there was someone that would come in and check on me a couple times throughout the night, but I was like, all right, man, game on. And it was. It was on like Donkey Kong. And after that first night, there was no question if I had earned my spot to stay. Not only did I carry that bar on my own, but for the first time ever, the patio bar was the hottest place in the whole club. Everybody was outside with me. We had created a real party, and all the cool kids were attracted to the vibe that I was putting off. And at the end of the night, the owner, who was previously hesitant, went to begging me to come on board. And I agreed under two conditions. One, I would be the permanent patio bartender. And two, since the bar staff didn't want to include me in the tip pool, we'd keep it that way. I was going to get to keep my own tips, and I wouldn't pool with them moving forward. He agreed, and I blew that patio up. I created a bar within a bar, even creating my own secret patio gate entrance for the VIPs. The patio bar had become the coolest spot in town. And having seen this, and knowing that I was aspiring now for more, he allowed me to test my wings. And so the owner gave me some additional opportunities. Within 3 months, I was now the marketing and advertising director for the entire club. The popularity and sales soared. Within 6 months, I was now the general manager. And this was my place, and I had control of it to run it. And run it I did, like Usain Bolt. We're getting cheesy, I know, guys. But I transformed this nightclub into the city of Long Beach's most vibrant hotspot, and I left a historical mark that will probably never be repeated. I was also the first person to bring bottle service, the LA style, Vegas style bottle service and promoters to Long Beach. And in Long Beach, it's known as the Saatchi era. Nothing like it has ever occurred, and nothing will probably ever happen again in the future. I took that place from going from $85K a month to $200K a month with lines out the door and around the corner. And how did I do it? Well, not by obsessing over spreadsheets, but by prioritizing what was right because it was right. Now, I didn't know it then, but I was creating my own culture of cool. I was creating this irresistible environment. And because of that, we attracted the coolest staff and the coolest guests and the coolest talent. And we were bringing acts in like Metal School and Fishbone and Avenged Sevenfold and Skunk Records and Paul Oakenfold and the Spasmatics and tons of DJs from the Vice Group, Win in Rome, Mickey Avalon, just to name a few. Many of my regulars were big celebrities like Dennis Rodman and Rampage Jackson and Christine Dolce, which was known as Forbidden. And at that time, she had the most followers on MySpace, which is dating myself a little bit, but MySpace was the most popular and most used social media of that time. And then we get graced with the presence of stars like Rome from Sublime, many of the Suicide Girls, Tila Tequila, and the Icky Twins. So after a few years of doing this, I had maxed out the sales. And then I was asked to continue to grow profits, but by reducing our costs. One of the owners wanted me to start cutting down the coolness and removing the things that attracted the top talent and employees. Now, this didn't sit well with me. And as my popularity grew and presence started becoming known within the industry, offers to step up to the next level started to pop up. And I was taking meetings with top clubs and groups in Vegas and Los Angeles. And I found myself receiving an offer I couldn't turn down. And it was to run the world famous Saddle Ranch. And this was during the height of its popularity. Everything seems like it was coming up for spades for me right now. And now, meanwhile, unfortunately, Saatchi crashed almost immediately. Like literally the very next weekend. When I left, so did my culture of cool. And so the owners, being as savvy as they were, they sold the place immediately to ensure the historical showed high sales. Now, with Saddle Ranch had been without a general manager for nearly 9 months at this point. No one could hack it. I had heard stories that very seasoned general managers would quit or get fired on their very first day. They weren't able to keep up with the demands. Before me, 2 weeks was the previous record. And just to add an additional challenge to all of this, just as I had joined the company, almost immediately we had the 2008 crash. And during the 2008 crash, you may remember, everybody was going out of business. And I mean everybody. Restaurants were dropping like flies. But not only did I stay, I actually grew sales by 3%, had an 11% labor cost, 17% pour cost, and 31% food cost at a steakhouse. And I was taking in nearly $1 million a month in sales. $99,750 was my biggest single sales of the night in a single day. And heck, man, I was tempted to run my card for that remaining $250 just so I could say I hit $100K in a single day. But on top of that, every single Monday, I had a line of people who waited hours just for their 30-second pitch during our brutal open interviews. And I wasn't doing any postings or paying some app like Indeed. I didn't chase. They followed. We didn't spend a dime on advertising either. I want you to think about that. We were on a 4-hour wait for dinner every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. Like I said, making nearly $1 million in sales a month. And I never advertised. We focused only on our internal environment, making it irresistible to both our guests and our employees. And we even had our own TV show. It was on VH1, and I had tour buses pulling up all day long. We were known worldwide. We were as cool as it comes. And talk about cool guests and celebrities. A day wouldn't go by without a huge major star coming in. We might as well have been on a Hollywood movie lot. Now, my favorite celebrity story was Slash from Guns N' Roses came in. And he came in to have dinner with his family. And at one point in the night, he approached me. And he asked me if I could take him to some spot away from all the people so he could smoke a cigarette. So I took him to the backside of our building. And it was free of guests and employees. And then for the next 15 minutes or so, Slash and I just bullshitted like two normal guys. No mention of music, no selfies, no autographs. Just two dudes bullshitting about life. Talk about cool. At that moment, I felt it couldn't get much cooler than that. So now, the next spot of success for me was in Hermosa Beach. Now, I had my son, and I had gotten married, and my priorities were starting to change. And these nights of running venues until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, working 70, 80 hours a week, this was all closing to an end. I grew up without my father. And this caused me a lot of pain, if we're going to be honest about this. And my dad chose to go make money traveling all over the world, and he left behind me, his son. And I refused to do the same to my son. Saddle Ranch is wild. And even though there was opportunities there for me to become the regional manager, because Saddle Ranch was rapidly expanding, that would only mean more time away from my boy. And so I took a job with a smaller family-based restaurant group in Hermosa Beach. And this turned out to actually be a great call, because Saddle Ranch's rapid expansion caused them to bring on these corporate partners. And these guys, they managed via spreadsheets, not coolness. And as quickly as Saddle Ranch expanded, they contrasted and they eventually crashed. And it showed me again how important it was to be cool and not to remove those exact benefits that made you cool and successful in the first place. So, now I'm back in the same place I had found myself so many times in my career, working at a distressed place that was underperforming and had so much potential. I was initially brought on to consult for a different project. It was called Rock Sushi. However, the partner who had brought me in backed away from the project, and so since he had me, he asked me to take a look at his first restaurant that he had called the Union Cattle Company. Now, when he first opened Union Cattle Company, it was super cool. And the owner was super cool. But he had desires to expand, and he went on to open some other very cool venues. But however, he left this location in the hands of some of his partners who weren't that cool. And they crashed it. So I applied the same philosophy to turn around another venue and restaurant again, focusing on culture building. Same chef, same owner, same concept, same building. The only thing that changed was igniting a positive culture of cool. And again, going from $180,000 a month to well over $225,000 a month. With, again, lines out the door and around the corner. We became the coolest spot in Hermosa Beach. And their previous culture was kind of incestuous, and it was fraternal. And everybody was longtime friends, and nobody wanted to be the bad guy. And I remember my first night scoping the place out, thinking, how could such a beautiful venue be so dead? But after my meal and my service experience, it was glaringly obvious. No one cared. Everyone here was on autopilot. And they were resting on whatever laurels existed from their past. And when I came in as a new captain, I was definitely the villain. Everyone was friends, and nobody wanted to point out anyone's lack of effort or their shit service. No one cared about the success or failure of the location. They just came in, They did their shift and they left. So the first thing I did was I moved them to a shared tip pool model and created incentives for growth and improvement in performance. And now, instead of a bunch of individuals doing their own thing, they were now forced to act as a team. And because the financial state of the location, I had no budget for floor managers. And this was a big staff, and the building had 3 floors. And there was no way I could manage all those people in that space all by myself. So I needed to create a system in which they would manage themselves. Now, this wasn't easy because at first, everyone hated me. Because they knew how shitty many of their other teammates were, and they didn't want to manage them. These people were more like family and less like a team. And they didn't want to tip pool with these other people. And before, under the old system, they would all protect each other because they couldn't see that their friends who had sucked and they couldn't tell them they had a bad attitude or poor service skills, and this was driving away the customers. But now, there was no denying it. This tied everyone together. So now, when those bad employees were acting poorly, their fellow teammates, not the manager now, would step in and correct that behavior because it was costing them money. And I had enacted a system ruled by social norms and not by laws. And within a mere 3 months, I had all the cancerous employees cleared out. They got voted off the island. And the staff previously, who wouldn't tell me who was responsible for the failed duties or the poor service standards, they were now coming to me and explaining in great detail who was doing their job and who wasn't. So now we were a team, and we are tied intrinsically to the same goal. And those team members who wanted to coast and soak up the efforts of others without doing the work themselves, they were out. And of course, this word of increased service and caring about the product and the service, it swept across the city. So guests who had previously written us off started coming back. And then the word spread about how great things were, giving us this amazing free word of mouth advertising, making it a place worth being seen at. And of course, this meant higher sales and higher tips. And so now the most popular staff who controlled their own following had a reason to work here. And then when we brought them on to fill the vacancies left by those loafers, they brought all their cool customers, which only skyrocketed our popularity, and word on the street about our service and irresistible cool environment grew even more. And then from there, I created a second brand on that same property, and I called it Ocean Bar. And I was the first person to bring bottle service to Hermosa Beach. We blew up. We became the premier destination and the hottest location in Hermosa. And I was very happy. I would have stayed forever probably, actually. But unfortunately, the owners had made a backside point deal with me. And they're paying me a very low base of basically peanuts. But I was happy to bet on my own success. And they never imagined the numbers that I would hit, that I would be anywhere near as successful as I was, although I 100% knew. So, because I was being paid on points and there were all of a sudden these discrepancies I discovered. And we were raking in the huge sales and profits, but somehow I was failing to get paid my points. And my trust was completely broken. And although I discovered this and I confronted the owner on the week of Thanksgiving, I had built such a great bond with my staff who had worked so hard that I didn't want to ruin their chances to have this killer New Year's Eve party that we were planning. So I agreed to stay until January 1st, but I made it clear I was only doing it for the staff, as good faith for all the hard work and dedication they had given me over the last couple years, seeing my vision, believing in me, and my system of teamwork and cooperation. So I left, and then from there I consulted briefly on this very fun project in Hollywood Boulevard, turning the famous Hollywood Billiards into a spot called Spot 5750. And there we worked with some really cool, huge celebrity acts like Snoop Dogg and Mike Epps and Zac Efron and the NFL. I had Far East Movement playing for me, Neon Trees, and more. And as fun as it was, like I said, I had had enough of the Hollywood life. And an opportunity popped up for me to see a different side of the business. So I started working for a broadline distributor, US Foods. And I went into this job knowing that it was just going to be a short-term kind of peek behind the curtains. I never enjoyed sales. And as much it is critical to build relationships with your vendors, I also always watched these salesmen from the sides of my eyes. I had created cost guard spreadsheets to monitor their honesty. And I have to say, red flags were popping up regularly. So once I was inside, I learned tons of their secrets. And I also listened to them brag about how they would make higher margins than the restaurants were as a salesman. Now, I did well there, but after a couple years, I had had enough. I had learned what I needed to learn, I saw what I wanted to see, and now I was ready to go buy my own place. I felt my education was complete. So, enter the Cervello story. So, with another very strong operator, his name was John Austin, and a good friend of mine named Fred Durf Batshon, we assembled this handful of investors and we bought a place called Cervello's. And when we took it over, it was a disaster. It was only doing $33,000 a month. However, within 9 months of being under my leadership, we had it to $125K a month. At that exact same time, we were enjoying success, and then I got connected to this guy named Wing Lam. And Wing was the owner of Wahoo's Fish Tacos. And they were looking to expand, and they had been working on this project that they were calling Super Wahoos. So he brought me in to create this brand, but I renamed it, and I called it the River House. Now, River House was an exciting project, but I'm sad to say that it never saw the light of day. It was an awesome lifestyle brand concept, and we were tying together the border lifestyle and the Southern California tacos, and then placing it in this higher energy, more elevated environment with heavy aspects of nightlife. And this is actually a dream opportunity. I was made the president. I was paid very handsomely. They included a rent on a house, plus they gave me 10% of the company. And this was in part because of the sweat equity I was putting in the beginning. And again, I was betting on myself because I know what I could do. But sadly, as amazing as brand and the concept and design and operational plans were, these lawyers and funding issues and some internal Wahoo's issues caused the project to halt just months before grand opening. And this was actually a major blow to me because simultaneously, some of the investors that we had at Cervello's were being a bit greedy and jealous of the success that I was being publicly credited with. And this fueled their short-sighted greed and maybe some cocaine. And so they pulled off a hostile takeover, forcing out my management and staff while I was out of state working with River House. And although what they did was highly illegal and immoral, and not to mention just plain stupid, the legal fight would have taken more time and money than it was worth. And I just brought this place back from the dead. And now those same guys that were responsible for crashing it previously, they're back at the helm. So, of course, within a few months, they had completely crashed it again. And it was back out of business. So the lawyer was right. I would have never gotten it back in time to stop the destruction. A few people have tried since to reopen it, but everyone's been met with failure. Now, today, it still sits empty. So these two events happened within just months of each other. And I lost everything. I went from realizing all of my dreams to being way worse off and really in the most difficult financial situation of my life. I felt broken. I was discouraged, a bit depressed, and I felt like I was on this horror show merry-go-round. Greedy bastards would ruin their restaurant. They would offer me the world to fix it. I would bet on myself, taking lucrative backside point deals. I would ignite a genuine positive culture of cool. We'd become madly successful, and then that same greed would reappear now there was money again to grab up. And I would leave. And then the place would crash again. And I was over this, and I needed to find another way. I had always worked, what always worked for me was creating teams. And this was all based on collective mindsets. And I believe so strongly in this unity message. I believe so strongly in profit sharing and employee ownership, which has brought me to where I am today. So I started focusing heavily on my consulting. I initially started as a broadline consultant, and I was helping everybody in any way possible. I was worried about paying my bills and supporting my son. And so I took on every project that came my way. And this was both unfulfilling, and it kept me dealing with the same low class of greedy, short-sighted owners. There was a reason their businesses were failing, and they often wouldn't hold up their end, or they wouldn't invest into the needed investments or improvements. And so it's funny, I'll break this down real quick for you guys, that there's two classes of consultants, right? So class one makes up like 90% of the consultants are out there. And these people are people you pay to tell you how you already feel, right? These are basically vultures as far as I see them. And many of them have accounting backgrounds. Few have tasted real success of their own. And so they find their prey and they just become so agreeable, never rocking the boat, never putting the owners of the bad decisions into question, just riding the paycheck until there's nothing left. I actually saw many of these consultants when I was working with US Foods. Some of these guys would have deals with either US Foods or Cisco, and they would sell themselves to the restaurant as a consultant, while all they really were like an affiliate marketer for the distribution house, inflating a pad that they could then take while they're insulating the owners from the actual solutions. Now, the second class of consultants is what I am, and we're a very small group making up less than 10%. We're deemed as the insultants. Insultants. And not because we're rude or brash, but because we're honest. And we're actually trying to help the owner and his staff, not just ride coattails. Now, I'm sure like what you guys thought of is many of those TV restaurant consultants. These guys would kind of fall into the most extreme version of what an insultant is. However, it's important to know that that's all fake, scripted, and acting. That's entertainment, folks. That's not reality. And although I'm sure many of my past client owners may felt my truth-telling felt like Gordon Ramsay impersonation, one of the big differences is you'd never see me belittling staff. One, I have the power to make changes. So I don't need to be emotional or yell or injure people. And yes, oftentimes there would be tons of dysfunctional staff in the restaurant. And I would have to get rid of them. However, there's only one person to blame. The owner. It was their bad decisions and poor culture that led to that person even existing there. So I would go to the source of the problem. And as most of you could imagine, a lot of these owners didn't love this. And they wanted me to blame their staff or ride them harder. They wanted me to agree that it was these external issues that they couldn't control. Or they wanted to blame everyone and everything except for themselves. Or they would want me to just do more marketing. Except to have successful marketing, you need to first have an irresistible environment. Okay? Marketing dog shit ain't going to change people's feelings about it. It's just going to reinforce how bad it is. So, this is why I decided to take my consulting in a slightly different direction. And so as of now today, I only do a couple things. One, I do the public speaking and podcasting, which we've talked about, and this is to find my people. Because the ones who understand the power of positive culture and want to align with someone like me and someone who's passionate about this is who's going to want to get with me and create real winners with this model. And then together we can create a real movement. Two, I'll work with new startups, people opening a brand new business. Why? So I can indoctrinate them, obviously. I'm pushing positive culture of cool as if it was Molly at a festival. I want to get these new owners hooked immediately on positivity. I'm keeping them from ever going down that dark path of us versus them mentality, trying to extract from them their staff instead of building with their teams. And when these people are coming into new businesses, their eyes are more open and they're more willing to take the risk to do the right thing. But I know once they start hanging out with all those other mediocre restaurant owners who rule by fear, they're going to start to convince them that their staff is the enemy and that they need to rule with an iron fist. 3, and this is the only way that I'll work with an existing business, is if they're dedicated and fully committed to building a genuine positive culture of cool. If they tell me that they've seen the light, they're sick of micromanaging, they're sick of chasing people down, they're sick of having staff that they can't trust and half the time don't even like, if they are fully committed to do a 180 and turn around and fully committed to re-landscaping their entire culture, if I believe that they're actually genuine and honest and not just desperate because their back is against the wall, then I'll take them on. And then the last thing I do, which is number 4, is I work with a draft beer monitoring system who tracks draft beer pours and then links them to POS rings, as well as having a full inventory control portion. Now, this keeps the lights on, and it allows me to be picky with who I work with. It lets me pay my bills so I can stay strong and principled to my beliefs of positive culture building. And it's also an amazing product. I don't sell anything I don't believe in. I get ROI for these owners in 4 to 6 months. And it opens up tons of positive training, again, when done right, especially if you could tie poor costs to bonuses and get the bar staff intrinsically interested in the same goal. It is a beautiful system. Okay, so real quick, we got to wrap this up. And I feel I've been talking way too much about myself, and I'm glad that this episode is almost over. But now I hope you also have a little insight into who I am and where I came from. And before we go, I want to impress on you that I'm not some kind of restaurant wizard, okay? I don't have secret magic powers. There's actually a science behind all of the success. Alex Edmonds, if you know who he is, he's the to-go market researcher, the Edmonds reports. He did a research that drew a direct line between positive workplace culture and superior stock performance. Now, what he did is he looked at the top 100 companies to look for who are renowned for their culture, and they outperform their competitors in the stock market by significant margins. So in more concrete terms, what he found was this could mean the difference between you making a solid 6% annual return or a staggering 9.8 annual return. So you tell me, which sounds better to you? And then there's companies like Southwest Airlines and Chobani and Jabatos, and they've all introduced profit-sharing models, and they've seen massive success in the wake of those decisions. For instance, Southwest offers employees stock at a 10% discount, and it's something like 90% of all the employees are now owners of common stock as a result. And now they don't need management telling them how to give great service, which they rank as the highest customer service of any airline every single year. But they also find ways within their culture to save. And for instance, I actually recently met a Southwest Airlines stewardess, and she told me this great story how they used to have these refill pads for like Coke and coffee and toilet paper. But and it was because of the quality of the paper and the printing, the binding, it was costing something like 50 cents a sheet. And so without being told, the staff started writing the refill orders on napkins, which will only cost a couple cents each. And this one act saved the company thousands of dollars a year. And it was initiated and carried out by caring staff on their own because they had the same intrinsic goals, which led them to an ownership mentality. So there are real tangible benefits of positive culture here. This isn't just fairy tale stuff. Culture has a major impact on the financials in concrete, objective terms. For me, each time I applied my principles of this positive culture, revenue skyrocketed. The establishments became community landmarks. And it wasn't just me. It was the positive culture and the unity message of teams working together for common shared goals and shared income increases. So, here's my concluding thoughts on this. That this success is 100% duplicatable. You could replicate this at home. And it's not due to any secret power I have, as much as I would like to think that I'm somehow special. My repeated results are a simple cause and effect. Okay, whew. I think we're finally done. All right, so that's it for me. Next week, we're going to go through chapter 5. And I'm going to start to show you the way with some real action steps. And let me give you a small taste of exactly what to do to solve your problems, to alleviate these pains. So we're going to find out, one, is your environment cool? And then we're going to start to look into the philosophy behind my culture of cool. And then I'm going to give you guys 3 action steps into cultivating your own culture of cool and how to exactly implement this change. So, I want to thank you guys very much for listening. Once again, this is Ryan Ransom Reveals. I'm your host, Ryan Ransom, and I'll see you guys next week.